Okay, continuing on with our very short video that introduced assignment 4. We talked about sketching for your logo design at the end of last class, right? Now I'll actually demonstrate it. So we're going to go to unit modules. This is in unit 9, and it's our first vector assignment. So how to design vectors. What does design mean? Design means to problem solve visually. Right? So how do we solve the problems of branding, of things that need to be used for vectors, for logos, for line art, for typeface design, right? These are all modifications to corporate logos during the pandemic that I thought were pretty funny. Right? So the first part of this module, which is going to take us a few days, is a question of the day. It's our third question of the day of 4 for the whole semester. So our first 3 are before the midterm, which is next week for us. And then our fourth one will be in the second half of the course. But this is to make sure you understand the differences between what vectors are and what rasters are. So that's part of this project. Then we're going to look at past instructor and student examples of our imaging project. Sometimes we do logos, sometimes we do branding, sometimes we do graphics. This one's more in the graphics range, but still very symbol-based. It's going to be a black shape Earth Day Achievement Badge image, right? And we'll do a black shape version and then a colored version as a vector. Think of it as something you would earn on a sash for like a scouting group. And we have our second proving ground as part of this project. It's its own discussion. It's its own assignment you turn in and get credit for, and it has 2 rubric requirements we want to pay attention to. But this is all to get you to push your ideas further through thumbnailing. And thumbnailing is how you do quick ideas and quick approaches in design with kind of spontaneous, very quick sketches. And then you're also going to critique your fellow classmates on their sketches and help them understand which one to proceed with for a refined sketch. Then we're going to use our refined sketch as our basis for our vector symbol. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to skip over question of the day 3 for now, but the discussion we have for it is going to be informed by these slides, which inform a lot of this project, right? So these slides start with an explanation of what's different between raster imagery and vector imagery. This uses the old name for raster images because it's in our learning outcome still, and it really needs to be updated, but that's something the state needs to do. So bitmap is the same as raster. It means pixel-based. And you can watch that video prepared by a past student. So vectors are perfectly sharp and clean at any resolution. They're ideal for single or simple color shapes with hard edges. Things like logos, things like typefaces, things like line art. They treat each shape as separate cutouts that are layered on top of each other. So they are usually fully opaque, just like cutouts of paper. Whereas we know that raster images are pixel-based, so you can see, if you look closely, the little jagged edges of this pixel illustration. And that might be because it's a slightly lower pixel count than is ideal, or it might be because it used a brush that had some variations to it. But this is what a vector of the same content would look like. And look how much cleaner that eye looks, the line width is, the flat color is, the control of the line weight. So pixel images, I want you to think of this, right? Early Mario. This is called 8-bit because you basically have 8 squares of information. So 64, 8 by 8. So the more squares there are, the more refined it can be if it's pixel-based, but that takes more and more memory. But newer versions of Mario are based on vectors, so that they're clean no matter how zoomed in you get on that character. And then you can color in within the vector shapes with various tools as well. So vectors have 2 components to them. They have the shape that can be filled, and then they have a stroke, an outline that can be filled. So here is the stroke and the outlines of the vector shapes for this sonic model. This is that sonic model rendered with the outlines turned off, the strokes turned off. So either of these things can be turned on or off on vectors. And that has to do with the way you want to color it, and we'll be learning more about that later. All right, how does this relate to symbols, to graphic symbols? And what we're going to be sketching is a black-shaped graphic symbol for an Earth Day achievement badge of our own design. So we are doing what are called pictorial logos, or sometimes they're called iconic logos, or iconic symbols, or pictorial symbols. It means we are not going to include any text with our image, no initials, no words, because we'll be learning type design later as a vector tool. So all of these are now recognizable symbols without the use of type, even though Starbucks used to have type as part of it. So there are three basic types of logos and branding. Logo types are ones that only use letter forms. So that the letter form itself, Coca-Cola probably being the most globally famous for this, but it's just the letters themselves, NASA, Google, Disney, that relate. Now, some of these have additional symbolic logos that go with it, and when you have that, you have what's called a combined mark. So a combined mark is a mix of the pictorial image and the logo type. Like Nike, in my childhood, was always put together. So you had the Nike logo type in the italics, and then you had the swoosh all together. But in the 80s, they started separating them out, right? And then in the 90s, you only had one or the other. And nowadays, you don't usually see the logo type as much as you see just the swoosh. Starbucks, same way. They started as a combined mark and then eventually made it into just an iconic logo. All right, but any kind of graphic symbol. The reason we call them graphic is because they need to reproduce well and they need to be clear at a distance. So think of like street signage. That's graphic. We don't want a full resolution, fully lit and gradated photograph to tell us which bathroom to use. We want a clear symbol, a graphic. So graphics, whether they're logos, whether they're symbols, whether they're Earth Day achievement badges, need to be clear, first and foremost. They need to be engaging. How can symbols not be engaging when they're just so familiar, right, that our eye just looks right past them? So if you do a symbol for Earth Day that's just a triangle, right, our eye is just going to not engage with it very much. But if you modify that triangle a little bit, maybe it kind of looks like a triangle, but when we look closer, it has veins in it, and it has a stem, and it's a leaf, then it might be more engaging. And most importantly, for the purposes of this class, these vectors need to be versatile. It means they need to work at a small scale, at a large scale. They need to work in a black shape just alone with any background. And then they also need to work in color, right? Because versatility is the key to use and utility. So these are the three basic approaches for pictorial logos. And here we have a logo type thrown in for good measure because they can be approached both in this way as well. So you're going to think of what your Earth Day achievement badge is going to be. I always recommend students think of two things, right? And then maybe play with mashing it up. So maybe it's like a leaf and water. So you think of those things. And then we're going to sketch it in these three different ways. So I had an idea for this project. I posted it even before the semester started. So if we move through, that's all on, those slides are linked in almost all parts of this assignment, but that was for the question of the day. And we'll get back to this, but this is what you're turning in for assignment 4. I'm not sure why it's loading so slowly. But you're going to post a refined sketch and then the black shape of your Earth Day achievement badge and then a color version of it for this assignment. But what we're doing today is we're doing proving ground number 2, which is sketching to get the refined sketch. Come on. It'll load. Very slow. So if you move to next, where it goes to proving ground number 2, I'm going to show you the sketching that resulted in that end logo. So it was this one. This was my instructor example. So I wanted to combine two things. This was for a barbecue restaurant, right? It was called Fork and Bull. So for Fork and Bull, I wanted to draw something that was central symmetrical, first off. So I'll put these side by side. Central symmetrical means the design starts in the middle and then everything balances out from it. The most obvious example is the Target logo. Now, these don't need to be perfectly symmetrical. So notice how the NBC Peacock, it has a beak to one side, but still the overall balance of that design is definitely central symmetrical. So this was my central symmetrical combination of two elements, because I like to do it that way. A bull and a fork, or forks in this case. Then I wanted to try out the idea and force myself to do it in a dynamic composition. Dynamic means that the eye moves across the image. It doesn't start in the middle and then kind of balance out. It starts at one end and moves through it. That's done with diagonals and with curves. You want to avoid horizontals and verticals when you're doing dynamic logos or dynamic symbols. So here I tried to combine the fork and the bull in a really kind of swooshy, dynamic way. And then the last one is a really kind of unique way that gets you to interrogate your idea. And it's why I often say it's good to have two things in mind that you're kind of mashing up together for your symbol. So for the bull and the fork, I knew I needed the bull to be shown in either the empty space or in the black space, and then I needed the fork to be shown in the opposite. So I decided to try to outline a bull, and this is based on kind of Southwestern art renditions of a bull. And because it's like Southwestern barbecue, and a fork shape in the black space, right? Now, all of these are quick sketches, and I try to kind of fiddle with them just to make them work, but they don't quite get there, right? They're all a little fussy. They all are adding too much, but I can determine from here which is the best approach, which is the approach I'm feeling most confident of. And when I've done that, then I'm going to open this in a new window. I hope it loads a little faster. Then I can settle on the finish. I wonder if we're having connection problems today. So I'm going to switch to my FaceTime here, just so I can show you what I ended up sketching. So what I did is I took this idea and then I refined it to look like this. Took the bull, I made the outline as simple and as graphic as I could, right? And then inside of it, I decided to make the nose of that bull a fork shape like that. That make sense? And so this is actually a play of positive and negative space where the shape of the bull would be black and the white of the fork would be cut out. So whatever the background behind the symbol would be, that would be the color of the fork. So that's positive and negative space, but it's also central symmetrical. How it kind of balances off the center. So now my goal is to come up with, and your goal, an Earth Day achievement badge. So I want you on this page, Proving Ground number 2, and we're going to sketch. And what we're doing is we're sketching our idea for Earth Day achievement badge, but we're sketching it in these 3 approaches. So here we see the butterfly, we see it symmetrical, we see it dynamic, we see it with a positive and negative space. They're combining the butterfly with electricity or energy. So you see the little spark here that would be in the wings made of the negative space. All right, so I'm going to pause it, and then we're going to go back to it, and I'm going to demonstrate that sketching for you. But I want you to gather your ideas together and have something to sketch on, or have your sketches out so I can look at them, give you some input.